All of their tactics are about simply destroying and burning the nearest houses.
During the occupation, it was like this. You meet someone on the street, you have a brief conversation, and you run back to your basement.
How long was the city under occupation?
From June 5th to September 12th.
It was horrifying, really horrifying. 1 or 2 houses were burning every day.
I was baking bread for 3 families. We were getting water from the well.
People lost 10 to 20 kilograms of their normal weight in 4 months.
Sviatohirsk was a tourist destination. When we came here on an expedition back in 2017 or 2018, we were amazed by the number of hotels, various services, restaurants, and so on. Now let's look at how Sviatohirsk has changed, how the city resisted the Russian occupation, and how it lived under occupation for more than 3 months. In fact, Sviatohirsk set up a heroic resistance with small forces. There was a small territorial defense unit. We are going to interview a member of this unit, basically one of its organizers, who has now become the head of Sviatohirsk, as well as talk to some volunteers.
We're planning to film Volodymyr Rybalkin, the head of the local administration in Sviatohirsk. He is a highly patriotic person and a Sviatohirsk local. He joined the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces in 2014, and today he actually manages the city. And we also want to talk to Roman, who comes from Kramatorsk, but's been living in Sviatohirsk for the past 10 years. Now he's back to the city, and together with the World Central Kitchen, he's feeding people, cooking about 500 meals daily.
We are now in Sviatohirsk city center. Yesterday we were driving by, but it was too dark.
I think there's a pizzeria on the left.
And we saw a single car with a light on and approached Roman. Roman has lived in Sviatohirsk for the past several years. Now he is restoring a small hotel that he built himself, and he is also actively volunteering. We will now go there and see how this process works and how people get food now.
We're going to go pick up some bread for some sandwiches, and we'll be feeding the locals today. Now we're driving through the city. Here we have a distribution point for humanitarian aid. A little further, you can see the Ukrpochta post office. They've resumed their work and installed an ATM here so that people can withdraw cash. The city is slowly recovering. During the occupation, I wasn't here, but I heard from the stories that life here was like this. You meet somebody on the street, have a brief conversation, and run back to your basement. It went like that in a loop. Everyone was hiding in their places. It was scary, but now it's much better. The bakery started working. Fresh bread every day. Now let's go pick it up.
How did this work come together?
The military administration cooperates with volunteers. There was an offer to open a food center for the locals. I responded to this offer, and now we're working on it.
How many people do you manage to feed now?
We started with cooking 220 portions. That was a week ago. Yesterday, we already had 485. We've got 500 to 600 portions planned for the day.
Is this the entire population that remains in the city now?
Yes, this is almost the entire population. When our Ukrainian administration came back here, they conducted a census. Approximately 500 or so people are left in the city, and that's who we count on to cook for.
How do you deliver products? What does this process look like?
The process, well, we have a center, a point for cooking and distributing hot lunches operating from 12 to 3 p.m. After 3 p.m., I drive around the city. There are assigned places where I arrive at a certain time and hand out hot lunches to people. This mainly concerns the neighborhoods of Shevchenko Street and the Sakhalin City District, which are the most affected and destroyed areas.
Are there any people who see no problem with the fact that Russians were here?
Probably, but they don't say it openly. Some have a latent attitude. It doesn't matter who's in charge, as long as there's peace. Still, they gravitate more towards the pro-Russian opinion, but they don't stick out now.
Even though the premises of the Oshad Bank and Privat banks were damaged, people can receive money at the post office without waiting in line. There's one shop near the bread factory which offers bread today. During the occupation for 2 weeks, only 2 people were baking bread at home. It was very, very difficult during the occupation. They were shelling every day, both morning and night. 1 or 2 houses were burning every day. Many people I know died. My classmate Kolya Sadovi, Vera, a shell got there and they died. My neighbor Alexei, whom we buried, a PE teacher Tokarenko, whose wife buried him in the yard, having to dig a grave herself. There was such heavy shelling. I collected the fragments that hid my left leg on the table. Can you imagine? I went out of the house and these pieces were there. And a lot of people got killed. It was scary to walk in the forest. They warned us not to. And I couldn't visit the cemetery, as it was mined. Many areas are being demined now, but life is still extremely tough. Nevertheless, the authorities promise that everything will be fine, everything will be restored, everything will be rebuilt. We hope for this and we thank our defenders who protect us. They say the winter will be long and cold. That's okay. You have to survive everything. I recall the story of my parents, who lived through World War II for 3 years. It was hard. They were starving and freezing. So, we're going to be all right. We have food, and thank God people help each other. Not a single person said that life had been terrible before. It was so lovely. Everything was fine. We lived as one family. Look, now it's all destroyed. It's such a pity. My name is Yevdokia Yarova. I'm 76 years old. I'm a teacher of Ukrainian language and literature. For over 54 years, I worked in 3 schools and taught children to love the Ukrainian language. Beautiful words were written in my classroom. My native language, my native word, whoever forgets you does not have a heart but a stone in its place.
There was no electricity since the 26th of May. And there was no water either. The water supply was over a little later. Well, we had to survive.
This is where I worked in the sanatorium. Not in this building, but in the next one. There's not a single window left. Everything was shattered and ruined. If God wills, it will be restored. And then we'll get back to our work in our sanatorium. Internally displaced persons have been living there since 2014. They arrived here from Donetsk and Luhansk, and when the full-scale war started, they were taken abroad. Some to Romania, some to the Baltic states, and yet again they were left with just 2 bags. It's terrible. So sorry for them. Nevertheless, they are alive. We left the city in the middle of May, and 2 weeks later, the bridge was destroyed. Our army retreated, the bridge was blown up. Scary, really scary. That's all right. Everything will be Ukraine.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, yes. Repeat that. What are you talking about now? The generators? One has already been unloaded, and the other one is unloaded now. Yeah. Currently in Sviatohirsk. But the crane and logistics suck, yes. This is the thing. Now it's been unloaded and we'll be free soon.
Volodymyr, are you from here? You're local, right?
Yes, from Sviatohirsk.
How did the full-scale invasion begin for you?
In 2014, are we talking about 2014 or the events of February?
About the events of February, about the full scale.
On February 24th at 4:40 a.m., there were explosions and Sviatohirsk felt the breath of war. After Putin held a meeting with the Security Council on February 21st, if I'm not wrong, it was clear to me personally what would happen.
Считаю необходимым принять уже давно назревшее решение. Незамедлительно признать независимость и суверенитет Донецкой Народной Республики и Луганской Народной Республики.
And it became evident that we will face a full-scale invasion. But it was a matter of when they chose the fascist method. At 4 in the morning, Putin declared war. And that's how this story began for Sviatohirsk. Sviatohirsk woke up at 4:40 in the morning. Already at 5 in the morning, I was at the gas station. The roadmap of the war was clear and understandable to me, because in 2014, I joined the ranks in the anti-terrorist operation zone in the east within the 5th wave of mobilization. The roadmap was developed and ready, a full tank of petrol, an understanding of where my family would be while I was engaged in war affairs, and what to do next. Is there a group of brothers in arms, a network of close friends with whom you can do something? At 5 in the morning on February 24th, we met 60% of the personnel of the territorial defense of Sviatohirsk. Then we entered this sector, and in fact, for 100 days, we were defending the city of Sviatohirsk and the surrounding territories. On the 2nd of June, we went to the other side of the bridge, to the village of Tyachanovka, and then another story began.
The bridge was indeed blown up, right?
The bridge was blown up on the 4th of June, and the city was occupied the next day. The town of Sviatohirsk is small and divided into a city center where we are moving through now. And further on, there is the area of the so-called Sakhalin. Sakhalin is a suburb of Sviatohirsk. Further, the Luman community begins. The town of Sviatohirsk is 3 kilometers long and 3 wide. You can go around the city in half an hour, as it is very compact.
What happened in the Sakhalin city district, where we are going to now?
The assault on the city of Sviatohirsk began at Sakhalin. It all started on the first day around 6 in the morning. The occupying Russian troops began an assault from the side of the village of Drobyshevo, which is about 10 kilometers from here. They went to storm Yarovo. Yarovo belongs to the Luman community, but it is 8 kilometers from Sviatohirsk. At approximately 11:30 in the afternoon, they were already at the Sviatohirsk border. Yarovo was, de facto, no longer ours. Then the assault on Studenok and Sosnoye villages began. Around the first day, all the armed forces of Ukraine were clustered in the city of Sviatohirsk. Step by step, they began to move to the other side of the bridge, and take up positions directly on the mountains.
In fact, Russians never managed to take the mountains.
That's impossible. We all knew that it would be unrealistic. You can't come with resources they had and cross the river. I was hoping they wouldn't enter the city because it made no sense at all. By trying to capture towns just for the sake of crossing them out on the map, they paid such a high price with human lives. Although it is hard to call them human beings, they are just monsters. Locusts that destroy everything civilized and alive by devouring everything.
The scale of destruction here is greater than even in Kupiansk.
It appears logical because there were assaults here. The offenses started on the first day. You can look at the enemy vehicles. They entered populated areas with armored vehicles and simply hid behind houses, trying to strike the Ukrainian positions on mountains. High-rise buildings are of great importance, so they were all destroyed. What you see is just a battlefield. You don't need to be a great military expert to understand that if you are in the valley, you will not be able to fight against the mountain. You cannot capture such an elevated place.
Is there a count of how many Russian soldiers were eliminated here?
Actually, no. You can make some guesses based on their vehicle number. One infantry fighting vehicle or armored personnel carrier includes approximately 10 to 15 people who may have been there. That's it. That means losses, losses, and losses. I don't think they count their soldiers at all, or it doesn't matter to them. They just invade the territory with corpses, like in World War II, and that's it. They have significant human resources, and they bury them. They knew their tactics, or we knew their tactics. We started defensive operations from the Borova village at the beginning of May. They simply lined up 3 or 4 tanks in front of the settlement and went on an assault, shooting the nearest houses. Houses began to burn, black smoke arose, and the wind blew and covered the villages. In such a way, the air reconnaissance could not coordinate the actions of the artillery. We are now entering the Luman community. Sviatohirsk ends here. The smoke was rising, covering the settlement completely, and our artillery could not see where to fire. All of their tactics are simply about destroying and burning the nearest houses, regardless of whether there are civilians there. That's how they marched. That's how they entered Sviatohirsk. This is the end of Sviatohirsk. We took off the Sviatohirsk city road sign here in the spring. The plant was not operating. That's it. That's the end of the city. Luman community and Yarova begin there. From this place, the assault on Sviatohirsk started. You can see that the BM-30 Smerch did not detonate this MRL missile. There is a lot of ammunition, and there will still be a lot of explosives on the territory of Sviatohirsk community. Sviatohirsk stands for both the city as the administrative center and the Sviatohirsk community, 12 more villages. And there are villages which were also under occupation, Bohorochny and Masanivka. Some villages were in the line of fire for a long time and were completely destroyed. Not a single house is left in Bohorochny, and not a single house is left in Dolina. That's also the aftermath of the Russian invasion, and it concerns the Sviatohirsk community. Some settlements, such as Mayaki, Sidorove, and Prishnip, are located along the Siversky Donets River. They became defensive fortifications where the Ukrainian armed forces prevented Russians from crossing the river. These settlements also suffered great destruction. Everyone who saw Sviatohirsk at the beginning of the full-scale war, people used to say Bucha and Irpin were utterly destroyed cities. But you can see with your own eyes what?
Yes, absolutely.
The city that met the war, where actual assaults took place, looks like.
It is incomparable.
Regarding the liberation, it was a very gentle liberation because the boys crossed the river on boats and accumulated their strength. And no one on the riverbank knew about it. It was an operation that our army knew about but kept secret. And then they entered Sviatohirsk on foot, without the support of vehicles, without anything, just automatic weapons. For you to understand that the Alexandrivka and Dobrysheve are about 20 kilometers from Sviatohirsk, and there were armored groups of the enemy. Had they known, they could have gone and somehow prevent this counterattack. Nonetheless, you see, they were both afraid and did not understand what was happening. So our boys entered very quickly. Turn left here. I'll show you the tank that fought against an old lady. Yes, people on boats swam, 2 or 3 men at a time transporting a soldier. There was one unit of the armed forces and the National Guard and several people from the territorial defense. This was a counterattack which led to the deoccupation of the city of Sviatohirsk.
It was consolidated with the other...
Let's step here. You can drive up and have a look. Well, here is a tank. You saw the tank, but here is what they fought. They went in, just drove into the yard and destroyed the old lady's house.
Let's stop here for a second.
Yeah, okay. Have you seen anything like that?
No.
You see a Russian tank. That's where it was hiding and firing at the mountain. And here is its turret. And here, the old lady picking the potatoes. This is the war.
In this area, one can identify how they hid the vehicles.
They tried to advance for about 5 days, roughly from June 5th to 12th. And then they changed their minds and came up with hiding in the woods and controlling the city. However, in fact, there are our flags there. I will show you now. It is essential. These Ukrainian flags were hanging there throughout the occupation, meaning they were there for 4 months, and no one removed them. Russians were afraid to remove them because they could not approach there. This side was under constant fire control of the armed forces of Ukraine. People, you see, are slowly coming back to repair their buildings.
Yesterday, we spent the night in a hotel the owners are trying to restore.
And what is it called?
Lesnoy.
This is not the only hotel case. Sherwood was one of the best hotels in peacetime. They preserved their premises. Now they also hope to celebrate the New Year somehow and rent out their rooms for people. People are fighting for their existence, and businesses are fighting for their existence. Sviatohirsk has always been a tourist mecca of Donetsk region. In fact, both nature and the eco-resource are unique here. I think you saw it with your own eyes.
Yes, I was here before the occupation.
Very few people know that in Donetsk region, there is such a city as Sviatohirsk, which has lakes, a river, its microclimate, and mountains. A unique environment.
What was happening to Lavra?
Well, nothing happened as it was under Ukrainian control, and the Rushists were striving to get there, to set foot on this land. However, they did not succeed. I suppose one of their aims was actually not Sviatohirsk, but Sviatohirska Lavra. Nevertheless, they failed. We were regularly visiting Sviatohirska Lavra as a military administration. We were helping people, carried out the logistics of humanitarian aid, and constantly organized evacuation from there. Therefore, the Lavra was on the side of controlled by Ukraine.
Is it true that some monks of the Moscow Patriarchy swam across the river and reunited with the Russian world?
I don't have information about that. Actually, there is information that people who were in the Lavra, they crossed the river and went to Russia at their own risk. Look, these flags, let's drive by so you can see. 2 years ago, in 2022, activists, including myself, brought and hung these flags. We ordered the holders for them and screwed them into the lampposts. Our Independence Day, we hung them up, showing the former pro-Russian mayor that Sviatohirsk is Ukraine. Thus, these flags remained hanging both during occupation and after deoccupation. These are great flags because they have a story behind them. These Russian monsters were here for 4 months. But they couldn't do anything, you see. They probably shot at them or did something else, but they never dared to remove them. There are no Russian flags here. I am very...
And there are so many of them here.
There are indeed many of them, yes. We thought that when we returned to the city, we would see Russian flags instead of these flags. And yet, no, you see, the Ukrainian flags remained. Russians were never able to remove them. They should have never come here. Of course, they looted everything, destroyed the infrastructure, and ruined the city, but what did they achieve? Nothing. And they paid for it with the loss of many human lives. That's it.
Were there many collaborators in Sviatohirsk?
Look, if you're talking about people who have yet to understand what was happening, there are many of them. We can hardly call them collaborators, though. Collaborators are people who took some active action, supporting some idea, right? And if people, as you say, see no value for them, statehood is not a primary value. And they grew up or were educated during the Soviet era. In fact, we mostly have elderly people left, young people and middle class left in the first days of the Russian military aggression. They were staying abroad or in a territory controlled by Ukraine. You won't teach people anything in a year, in 10 or 20 years. You won't achieve any results.
Shouldn't they have learned what Russia is after almost 4 months of occupation? It's one story when you see it on TV, but when they loot here...
You know, that's an interesting point. I think you should talk to the locals and get feedback from them.
We communicate actively.
It would be fair, and you will see everything yourself, who and to what extent made conclusions from this situation, or who did not. We have been keeping an eye on the city while it was occupied, constantly monitoring what was happening. We saw our compatriots and town people on Russian channels. They have been giving interviews, rejoicing, applauding, and saying, Russia is cool. Now we are watching them as well. They're now saying Ukraine is cool. What can you talk about? Should such people be considered a collaborator? I don't know. Now whoever comes, they will say it's cool, and that's it. We talk about people who have not yet understood what a state and a person within a state means. This is an educational gap. I guess collaborator, former head Volodymyr Bandura, was hiding in this hotel. Russian soldiers found him when they entered the city.
The mayor of Sviatohirsk, Volodymyr Bandura, took the side of Russia. Back in May, he used to call the Russians occupiers. The price of truth is now revealed. Bandura retained his position, and now he will head the administration of the city for the occupiers.
He is now somewhere with them in Russia, whining. I don't know what he will make of it there, but...
What number of people ran away with the occupiers to Russia?
Small percentage. These are some people that, as you say, were collaborators. These people accepted the idea of the Russian world and took the responsibility of being the administrators when Russian soldiers came there. Therefore, no doubt they fled together with the Russian soldiers. I guess they have left Ukraine and the city forever and will never return.
You say they accepted the idea of the Russian world. Do you understand what the idea is? Murder, barbarism? Is this the Russia world, key concept, or something else?
Look, if we're talking about this, I put the idea of the Russian world in quotation marks. What I mean by that is what is provided to Russians in the mass media. However, the idea of the Russian world is, I am sure, to destroy everything, the whole civilization, to devour it. It's a locust swarm. Actually, we saw it. All the situations, wherever they are, and somehow connected with toilets and shit. They are monsters. What did they set up in 4 months in the city of Sviatohirsk? Nothing but street trade. Twice a week they brought some products, and those were local entrepreneurs who stayed here. They went to Svatovo and brought alcohol and cigarettes for people to drink and smoke. That's the entire idea. That's it. Nothing more. Oh yeah, the occupiers have also been withdrawing the pension payments from cards and charging a 30% fee. Well, that's the Russian world.
Nightmare.
It has been going on for 4 months. I could tell you that people lost 10 to 20 kilograms of the normal weight in 4 months. What is here to say? Now you can see with your own eyes what Ukraine has done in a month and a half. We got Oshadbank branches operating, we've got mobile communications, pension payments, and Ukhrpochta postal service. We have entrepreneurs returning, and the bakery is set up and running. You can see the difference between what a state is and what a quasi-republic is. Well, that's what it looks like. That's how the armed forces of Ukraine and the Russians have been watching each other for 4 months. Hello. Yeah. Okay.
How was the undermining of this bridge happening?
The bridge was mined back in March, and it was under control. It was under control because the assault started from Izum, the city of Izum, and the Yaremivka village. Basically, everyone expected the Russian troops could reach Sviatohirsk along the Donets River and take this bridge under fire control. This bridge would help them move to the other side to continue their offensive and capture Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and go further in Donetsk region. Therefore, this bridge was mined back in March, and on June 4th, it was blown up. The enemies couldn't even get here. You can see why. How can you reach here? Anyone appears too exposed here, and everyone who showed up was immediately destroyed. And that's it.
Tell me more about this action when the Ukrainian soldiers hung the flag on the Artem monument. That was back in...
It took place, if I'm right, on August 22nd, not on National Flag Day. This was a battalion of National Guard. I won't say which exactly. They proved that Sviatohirsk is Ukraine, and once again reminded everyone before the National Flag Day that Ukraine is invincible and has a spirit. And on September 12th, Liberation Day, everyone saw it with their own eyes. While we were here, we kept telling people, yes, we may have to go over to the other side, maybe under enemy pressure. The Russians did have an advantage in troops and artillery at the time, but we knew that we would come back. And here we are back. I think that victory will come soon, and everything will be fine. We will return our territories altogether: Crimea, Donetsk region, and Luhansk region, and we will continue to live and rebuild our state.
I believe that Sviatohirsk was a very crucial target for the Russian invaders. It was a place of power, and I believe they really wanted to capture the Lavra, but they failed. It's very symbolic, and it once again emphasizes our invincibility. Clearly, the city suffered a lot from the invasion, and people experienced this period in many different ways. Admittedly, I was impressed that on the first try, we were able to establish contact with people on the street who helped us settle in and organized our accommodations. As you can see, we're not spending the night in the car.
Yes, we were driving on the road to Sviatohirsk, and there was one car with the light on. We stopped. Vitaly, our producer, asked if there was a place to spend the night, and here we are.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to the monks, but that's not bad either.
Yes. We were considering what was the worst option, spending a night in a car or the Moscow Patriarchate.
But our fate prevented us from both. And in contrast, we have warm, even hot tea. We have mushrooms, we have awesome salty pickled apples, salad, sweets, and a very warm welcome.
Yes, there is even electricity and hot water. Very cool people welcomed us.
We spent a lot of time in Sviatohirsk. We were lucky to talk to local volunteers who cook hot meals for the locals every day in the field. And this is truly encouraging because people live in such harsh conditions and still think about others. They care about their people. Today I have an aftertaste of care and love because I feel that our people have much of it.
I used to live in Indonesia, and I always wondered why people continue to live in the most seismically active areas of the world. Volcanic eruptions and earthquakes are frequently occurring there. There are several hundred of millions of people, more than the entire population of Russia, living in these regions. And they're basically minefields that are constantly exploding. And this cannot be controlled in any way. It's just nature taking its course, and people simply choose to live in these minefields. We have a very similar story now, I believe. All such cities as Sviatohirsk, which are destroyed to the ground, it really looks like some kind of attack of locusts that just flew through the city. And you see so many luxury hotels that used to welcome guests, but now they are in ruins. It will be more expensive to restore them than to simply build new ones. But it's cool that people are coming back. They are not many yet, but some entrepreneurs have returned and they are trying to reconstruct something. Some people are planning to spend New Year's Eve there and accommodate guests. And that's super cool. And that's what is indeed inspiring. I think that we should now be looking at countries where natural disasters happen on a regular basis. Our disaster is not natural, but man-made. Because our neighbor country is retarded.